Hey all, Kathy Beal of EmpowermentUnlimited.net with a brief follow-up to an issue I raised in the political astrology conversation that I had with Cindy of Soulprint Intuitive Tarot that was posted earlier this week on both of our YouTube channels. If you haven't watched that video, I encourage you to get the full context. The Aries full moon of October 17 was going to be highlighting something coming at Trump that would come back again at the end of January and the end of March. And it has to do with the planet Mars action, aggression, crossing over his signature for his family money and the Trump organization, um, Saturn and Venus in his 11th house of group associations. Well, Rachel Maddow reported the evening before the full moon another very interesting way that this has played out. And it has to do with Stormy Daniels. Now, there is a pending criminal sentencing for 34 counts of falsifying business records, of hiding fraud in an election fraud, uh, hiding the fact that he made hush money payments to her before the 2016 election during his candidacy. And now her attorneys are letting people know that this summer Trump tried again to silence her, to keep her from saying anything about him ever again. And this time it would have been buried or hidden or cloaked by showing up as a reduction in what she owes him to settle a judgment that she has against him. And apparently this came up because she put up a GoFundMe. She got the money to pay off the judgment. His attorneys got in touch with Trump's attorneys and said, we could pay it off. And they said, well, how about this? Okay, so this has staying power. Here is the chart for the Aries full moon and how it interacts with his chart. The line, the long line, shows the sun and the moon opposite each other in the houses of communication and litigation, and they are squaring. They're in a demand for action with Mars. You see, I've circled Mars up there in the 11th house of group associations, communities, friends. Mars is moving right onto his Saturn and his Venus. Interestingly, this is playing out in a way I had not foreseen. Saturn representing the legal system or lawyers, and Venus representing a woman. This has staying power, and whatever else comes up, comes out, that's going on now is going to come back around. One more thing I'll mention, if you notice down there in the second house of resources, money, talents, abilities, there's that thing that looks like a horseshoe. It is exactly at the same position as his Neptune. His talent is creating vaporware, something that has no, grift, illusion, fantasy, uh, and that horseshoe is the south node. What he reverts to, what he is reverting to is old behavior. How can we hide this? How can we cloak this? Well, what's going to happen? All right. Mars is going to go retrograde in December, and uh, it's going to end up traveling across this territory again. And it will be in exactly the same position that it is at the full moon on January 24th, right after Inauguration Day, interestingly. And so notice that we've got Mars moving into the same pressure point with Saturn and Venus, and its opposite, Mercury, in the fifth house. Now, Mercury is planet of communication. It's in the sign of the government. It's in the house of his children, romance, risk taking. We'll see how that plays out. And at the same time, in the seventh house of partners, open enemies, I have circled Saturn in Pisces. Saturn representing the government, an authority figure, the law, consequences, and it is moving in on a square to his Uranus up there in the public 10th house. Now, Saturn exactly squared that Uranus on August 19 at the start of the Democratic National Convention. And at that time, the planet Venus was also two other planets. Jupiter was part of the square. Jupiter was on top of, which expands everything, was on top of his Uranus, his rogue actor, his disruptor planet. And Venus was opposite Saturn. Now, this is highly technical. Venus representing women, perhaps I thought a woman judge, was over in his first house. Let's see if I can draw this for you so you can see real quick. My here come my crappy drawing. So we had Venus over here in the first house, Venus in Virgo, adding to this pressure, this pointing at the squeeze onto that Uranus. Well, on that day, August 19, the Democratic National Convention started, and guess who was having her Venus return? Venus was coming back to the spot and occupied at her birth. That would be Kamala Harris, and her Uranus and Pluto were also part of the mix. So there's something here about consequences, whether they have to do with this woman, with it, maybe he was talking to Stormy at that time, because she could be this. Also, it could represent that. At any rate, late in January, consequences coming back, and they have some kind of political, I'm sorry, it's not, well, maybe political, but they definitely have a uh, legal uh, consequence to them. So now let's move ahead. Give me my mouse back. So sorry. All right. So then let's see what happens once we get to the third time that Mars is going to be on moving into his Saturn and Venus. And I'll just explain it that something will perfect when the conjunctions become exact, but the buildup brings a tremendous amount of pressure, as we've seen by what happened on October 16th. So at that point, notice that Saturn, over in the house of other people's money, hidden deals, also criminality, Saturn consequences, ramifications, the government, having to own up, is going to be exactly trine the middle point between Saturn and Venus. Saturn's at 23 Cancer in his chart. Saturn's at 24 Pisces in the transits, and Venus is at 25 Cancer in his chart. So there will, and Mars and Saturn in the sky are going to be collaborating very, very easily, effortlessly. There could be some huge legal consequence that comes at him at the end of March. And indeed, if you look at the top of the chart, I have circled transiting Uranus on his midheaven. In fact, it will have only in the days before then moved across his midheaven. Uranus going across his midheaven is what I have been referring to as the wrecking ball. And this could play out in many ways. It's going to have something to do with the revelations and the developments and the actions happening around the Aries full moon. It could also involve many, many other things. But this is an indicator of legal action closing in, locking into place, and his stability, his place in the world, his home, his public life, everything just being hit with the wrecking ball for the third and final time. So I say end of March is a point of unrecoverable collapse. So we'll just have to watch. Okay, if you like this, please share and subscribe.